Thanks for staying with us. Now, with over 100,000 people affected by last week's floods in KwaZulu-Natal, the Provincial Department of Education is urging school principals to accept pupils back in class, whether they are in uniform or not. Now, it comes after a principal from one of the schools came under fire for turning away pupils who were not in uniform. For more on this, I'm joined by Muzi, Mahlambi, spokesperson for the KwaZulu-Natal Department of Education. A very good evening to you. Thank you for your time. This is something you want each and every principal in KwaZulu-Natal to understand, that pupils cannot be turned away whether or not they're in school uniform.
Good evening, Paul, and evening to your viewers at home. It is true that on Monday evening, we issued a circular to that regard, where we were informing our schools to say, look, let us all be sensitive due to the fact that we had floods just before Easter weekend. And Tuesday was going to be the first day of reopening of schools in the second term. And through the provincial government, we had gathered information that a lot of homes had been washed away, which was going to affect a lot of our learners. So we wanted schools to be sensitive to that matter, to say some of the learners will want to attend schooling, but because they will have lost everything, including school uniform, we did not want the uniform to be a deterrent of our learners from attending school. So we issued that particular circular, and we are very much grateful to a number of schools that have been sensitive and accommodative to that effect.
And the sensitivity is with obvious reason, especially considering that some of the children that need to go to school may be orphans. They may have lost their entire family and, of course, not even have more than the clothing that they're wearing to school. What sort of arrangements are now in place to ensure that the children do get school uniform?
Such interventions, we are doing them intergovernmental at the provincial level. Such interventions are led by the Premier himself, as a social development department. Is a leading department in this regard. But what we are doing, we are assisting them in terms of identifying, taking stock of how many of children who will be our learners, as it were, who are in the community halls, who have lost everything, some of them including losing parents themselves, so that as a government of KwaZulu-Natal, will then be coming together as all the departments to then say, if then it touches you as a department in this regard, be it health, be it education, be it social development, in terms of the programs that you have that are interventionist in nature. What is it that we can put in one pot so that our intervention is integrated in that kind of fashion? And we have the Premier meeting with his cabinet every evening, which then assists us as the departments, because after that meeting, respective MECs, they hold their own meetings with their departments and sharing the marching orders from the Premier. And there are also meetings that we hold as department, build up to the cabinet's meeting, so that the MEC, when he goes to that meeting, goes with the information as to the statistics of learners, like we are a Department of Education, how many learners are in need of the uniform, how many learners are in need of stationery, and how many learners are in community halls. and how many of those are attending our schools, and all that information, then we put together. Then we lead when it comes to matters that pertains to our department.
Yeah. We know that more than 600 schools at least have been affected by the deadly floods of KwaZulu-Natal, and we saw education officials, Minister Angie Motshekga and her team coming in to assess the extent of damage, mud on the floor, floating desks, and flooded grounds were some of the sites that were seen. How far are you as a department in reaching some sense of normalcy when it comes to being able to house the learners and teach them in a class that is perhaps not damaged when it comes to infrastructure and ready for teaching?
Before Monday, we had information that 630 schools were affected. But after Monday, we began a process of then dissecting that kind of an information as to the degree of the damages that you are referring to. And we can tell you that about 500 schools, some of them, the assessment that we made was that schools together with the districts, they can be able to repair those schools. Mm-hmm. Some of the schools were damaged. You'll find that it's only a few classes that were affected. So with the rearrangement of the space, you could then make use of that particular school. And every evening, we take stock of how many of the 630 schools are now in operation. We can confirm that more than 500 of those schools are in operation, even if some of the infrastructure is not fully utilized, but a degree of teaching and learning is happening. And we can confidently share with the public that over 90% of attendance by both educators and learners is obtaining in our schools, despite the situation that we still find ourselves.
I suppose the climate is a bit different, as over 90% of teachers and pupils arrive and come to the learning environment, considering that when they leave, they're faced with the harsh reality of what happened, some losing loved ones, some having nowhere to stay. What sort of interventions are coming to the schools to perhaps help on a psychological front?
Yes, we do have a social program that we have devised. Obviously, we are not a specialist department when it comes to that, but working together with the social development department, we have devised a program for our learners when they're at school and when they are at home, some when they are in those accommodated makeshift kind of places where they are kept at the moment, as the provincial government together with national is still trying to resettle those people who were affected by the recent floods.
Matric pupils, the ones that have been in contact and interaction with Newzroom Afrika, have spoken about their concerns that they have lost on learning time when it comes to the impact of the floods. Are you concerned about the matric class of 2022?
We are concerned, and what we were discussing in our meeting is that KwaZulu-Natal seems to be peculiar because we were all affected by pandemic when it was 2020. 2021 we were affected by both pandemic and the unrest that took place in July. This time around, we are affected by the floods. Building on the experience that we have had over the last 3 years of dealing with such eventualities. We are also going to be digging deep into our arsenal as to the experience that we have accumulated over the years in dealing with the situation when it comes to curriculum recovery. We want to put our learners at ease to say it is one of the main and if not core a program that in our meetings we always discuss as to how to mitigate against the learning losses or teaching time, as it were.
Over 100 schools suffered extensive damage. I mean, as you make mention of how many schools are now able to function and accept learners, what happens then to those who may find themselves in a position that they may not be able to access their school because it was severely damaged, or perhaps it may be inaccessible, looking at the infrastructural damage in KwaZulu-Natal? How are you then accommodating those learners?
As the work progressed, as from Tuesday, we have noted that even the 101 schools that we're saying were not reachable, but you'll find that there was a section of a good section of learners and educators who could access those schools using alternative routes, but would be happy if we will have 100% of attendance. Together with the Department of Transport, we are working around the clock so that when the next week ends, the situation will have improved drastically.
When it comes to the learners who may have passed away and those who are still missing, what are the numbers looking like?
The last time we checked, we were standing at 64 with one food handler and with one educator. We also, through the premier, when we even had a prayer on Thursday, the provincial prayer, a word of condolences was passed at that level. But we have also deployed our officials to be visiting the homes, and when there are burials of such, that their presence be guaranteed, and then they also speak on behalf of the department.
Very well. Thank you so much for your time. KwaZulu-Natal Department Spokesperson Muzi Mahlambi speaking to us to some of the dynamics around learning and teaching, and of course learners not being turned away when it comes to attending school, whether or not they're in uniform or not.